Hello, my name is Julius Agbor. You can just call me Julius. I was born and raised in Cameroon, that's in West Africa, as you can notice from my accent. I received my master's and doctorate degrees in economics from some of South Africa's best universities. I also went further to pursue specialized training from the University of Cambridge, that is in the UK, and also from Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. I'm married. I've been married for 18 years, as a matter of fact, 18 years, to my confidant and best friend, Belinda, with whom we have 3 phenomenal kids and also an adopted daughter. So let me tell you a little bit about my professional career. Prior to coming to Vanguard 3 years ago, I was a consultant for the World Bank institution in Washington, D.C., and I've also been a consultant to the U.S. State Department Foreign Service Institute in Arlington, Virginia, and a consultant also to the U.S. State Treasury, Department of the Treasury. Prior to that, I've worked as a research fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. The U.S. should be doing so much more in terms of engaging with the continent's leaders. There are still quite a handful of dictators in the continent, and President Obama promised in 2008 that he wanted to see more of fewer strong men and stronger institutions. But as of now, we still have quite a handful of strong men in Africa, at least 5 of them. And we don't have any evidence that the president is doing anything about that. And so that is a very critical issue, how he engages with African dictators. In fact, many are not happy with his attitude towards Equatorial Guinea and Uganda. Many think that he has been a little bit complacent. He has not been hard enough on African dictators, and governance is still a major issue in Africa.
Well, I absolutely think that, and as we started, I was involved in the 70s and 80s in the whole anti-apartheid struggle. Our history on the continent has not always been a great history. And so I think that there's things that we need to rectify, but at the same time, I would never want to tip it in the other direction and say that there's too many problems in Africa, or Africa should be able to sustain itself, so let's cut off U.S. funding. I think both would be irresponsible.
Both would be irresponsible. What about you, Agbor Julius? More of the same, or do we need a paradigm shift here, really?
I think we need both. You need aid, you need trade. And there's also the emphasis, as the consensus seems to be going, that Africa should do their job well. They should manage their countries properly. So there comes the requirement for good governance, so that Africans should not be dependent on aid. I think, honestly, that is the lack of competent leadership that deprive the citizens of the right to a better livelihood.
What about the priorities by some of these leaders, really? Because one of my greatest interviews, I have to tell you, in my last 13 years hosting this program, was hosting a former Botswanan president, Festus Mogae. He was president at the time. I remember asking him, by the way, how did you get here? What was your mode of transportation? This was September, coming to the UN General Assembly. He said, I came via commercial aircraft Shaka. I said, you did what? You come from a very rich country by any measure. I was looking at your website, you have huge, budget reserves and what have you, and yet your colleagues, they run around the world with corporate jets.
That's right.
When their people cannot have 2 meals a day, the children cannot go to school, they cannot even drink clean water.
So President Banda from Malawi sold the presidential jets.
Also the Mercedes-Benz limousines.
Right.
She's still president.
Right.
How do you go about that? The priorities.
That is very clear, and I think it is even biblical. The Bible says that where there is no vision, the people perish. So if you have leadership that doesn't have vision, there's no priorities that are for the people, then the people perish.
And I've also been an assistant professor of economics at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. In terms of publication experience, my publication experience and conferences, I've published several articles in high-profile journals, including in the New York Times, and I've contributed several book chapters and presented at several high-profile conferences. Just to name a few, the American Economic Association. I've presented at the University of California, Berkeley, the University of California, Irvine, at Cornell University, at the University of Oxford in the UK, at the International Monetary Fund Area Studies Department Seminar Series, just to name a few. In terms of my ministry life, I'm an ordained minister with the so-called network of the Assemblies of God. I planted a church about 2 years ago on September 17, 2017, right here in Irvine, called Irvine First Assembly of God, which I currently pastor as a campus pastor. I've published 2 books, namely Before the Rapture, the 7 forms of deception that each Christian must overcome. And the first one was on marriage, what you need to know about marriage. I'm also a licensed minister to the Orange County Juvenile Hall, where I do weekly one-on-one correctional ministry to incarcerated youths at the Orange County Juvenile Halls. I also blog. My blog page is Your Word for Today. You can visit the platform to get inspiration, impactation, and blessings. Now, let me talk. Why am I passionate about teaching economics and finance? You see, I'm an example of folks that have surmounted the difficult challenges of being born and raised by peasant parents. I've experienced poverty as a kid. And when I see young people who are disadvantaged in life, I realize that I could be one of them. Inevitably, my family background oriented my interest in studying economics and finance because I wanted to understand why I was poor and why some of my peers were rich. I also wanted to unravel the puzzle as to why the United States is so rich and many countries in the world like Togo are so poor. That broke my attention and caused me to go study economics for all of my life. And you will realize that I bring a lot of passion into my teaching because these are issues that I have personally wrestled with. So what's my goal in this class? My foremost goal in teaching this class is because I want to train competent and ethically responsive leaders who are equipped for the 21st century digitalized global economy. How am I going to achieve that? I achieve the goals of training highly competent and ethically responsive leaders by cultivating your critical thinking skills. I want you to be able to recognize and challenge assumptions when you listen to the news, or when you participate in meetings, or when you just listen to people speak. Are you able to recognize the assumptions that they are making and to challenge them? I'm aware, don't make the mistake, I'm aware that some of you don't feel quite confident about yourself, about your ability to learn and understand quantitative content, but that's okay. That's okay. Friends, there's always a feeling of impostership in all of us, whether you're college students or professors. But I want you to know that I believe in all my students, that I believe that each one of you is capable of successfully learning rigorous content and be able to measure up to the high standards that I'm going to be holding you to. Finally, as a professor mentor, I want to go to work I want to work with each one of you. Let's make a date for coffee or tea during this semester. I want to hear your story because your story matters. Welcome to my class.